All right, let's have a look at the rectifier models in the AX8 and how we can dial them in. This obviously applies to the AX 3 and 2 as well. Let's get into it. I've got Recto 1 Red dialed up with factory cab number 174. So this is an impulse response of a 4x12 Mesa Recto cab with an SM57. These are the totally stock settings at the moment. I'm playing a PRS SC245. It's from 2008, made in America. Stock pickups sounds like this. I'm playing a PRS SC245 in drop C with the stock pickups. It sounds like this. So as you can hear there, plenty of fizz, plenty of low-end boom, which is very typical of these amps. There's a few tips and tricks that I like to really dial these in. Let's get started. The first thing I like to do is use the low cut in the cab block. Set that to 80 hertz as a starting point. Now it all sounds like this. So that takes out some of that low-end boom, which is good. We'll leave the cab block for now and go back to the amp. Now, the rectifiers are a super bass-heavy amp. If you've ever played a real one and just kind of gone, oh, cool, I'll set this thing up and I'll sort of set the EQ near, noon on everything. It sounds a little bit like this, which isn't a bad sound, but it's not very well defined and it doesn't really sit in a mix very well. There's way too much low end and uncontrollable fizz and things like that. So these 4 EQ controls, ignore the bright control there, the bass, mid, treble, and presence all interact and are really, really important. So this is just where I like to set these amps. I like quite a tight, well-defined sound with as much separation between the notes and a chord as I can get, as well as being like smooth enough for when we boost it up for lead stuff. So these are my sort of starting points on a real rectifier. I own a Rev G from the 90s. It's an amazing sounding amp, but it can sound like absolute balls if you don't dial it in right. So this is how I dial in my real amp, and I find the settings port really well to this Recto 1 Red model. The first thing, set the bass to 2, really low, and set the mid just below noon. We're going to tweak the mids and the presence quite a lot, and I basically set the treble to 6. And then the big trick here is to turn the master volume down. So on a real rectifier, the volume pot past about 9 o'clock doesn't do a whole lot. It just sort of makes the amp sound even flubbier and crummy sounding. So it doesn't have an audio taper pot either. So it's basically as loud as it's going to get around 2 or 3. And then from there on, you just get power amp distortion, which we don't really want with this amp. We want that really articulate preamp distortion as opposed to the sort of big boomy power amp distortion. So I'll even set this low. I'll set it to 1.5, so about 9 o'clock. And we can compensate by using the level control. Let's set that to 1.5. And the level control I'll bump up. Let's try bump it up by 3 dB. So straight away there, that to me is a way more articulate rock and metal guitar tone. From there, we can play around with the input drive. With the input drive quite low, you get basically a sort of Marshall-y kind of tone. So as you can hear there, plenty of fizz happening. With this particular impulse response, that sounds a little bit thin to me. So I'll turn the bass up. Let's go up to 4. And I'm also going to increase the mids. Let's go to 7. Why not? Let's have a listen to how that sounds. That's not too bad at all. This is where the presence control comes in. Let's have a listen to the presence control all the way off, then all the way up. So all the way off. And you can hear there that this is really sort of like a balance control that gives you just the right amount of fizz. So around 5.5, as you can see there. Let's play around with the other 3 EQ controls now. The mid and the treble are really, really powerful. I'll turn the mid all the way up, and I actually quite like this setting. It sort of makes it sound a little bit more like a Marshall. So with the mids up, it's got a really sort of forward rock kind of sound. With the mids down, you get that classic rectifier thing that it's so renowned for. It's like the sound of the late 90s and early 2000s. Personally, I like the mid high because I don't want the guitar to get sort of buried in the mix. Around 7 or 8, I find works pretty well with this particular IR. Anyway, as always, we want to dial these in to match the IRs that we're using. So if you've got a particularly dark IR, you might need to boost the treble in the mids. If you've got a bright IR, vice versa. So that's sounding pretty good at the moment. Let's have a look at some of the advanced controls. The most effective one I find with the rectifier is playing around with the sag control, because obviously on a real rectifier you can have tube rectification section, which sounds a lot squishier and saggier. So if you want to emulate the solid state rectifier, I like the sag at around 1. It sounds like this. And as you can hear there, that changes the response of the low-end transients quite a lot. You get way more bloom with the supply sag up, and it feels really good to play with the supply sag up. So I like that. That's where I like my real recto as well. The other one, which is so important, is if you go into the speaker section, this low resonance frequency. Messes have this like huge low-end resonance. So if you are finding that you've got, for example, let's set the bass up to like, 7 and have a listen to this. You can probably hear through your speakers like a lot of low-end rumble. So with that, what you can do to attenuate that is to turn the low resonance frequency down. 85 hertz seems to be a pretty good place. Let's have a listen to that. And finally, the speaker drive section. I like to turn the motor time constant up for the rectifier to about 150 and give it a little bit of speaker comp. Let's take that to 5. Sounds like this. So that sounds pretty cool and very recto-ish. Now, to really take these amps to the next level, I like to use a drive as a pre-boost. You can try the Tube Screamer. That one always works pretty well. Drive on 0, level on 10, and make sure the balance doesn't move. I like to turn the tone up to about, say, 7 or 8 on these. This is what it sounds like. I'll kick it in halfway through. But my personal favorite is this block I've made, which emulates my Anarchy Audio Workhorse pedal, which is a clon style boost. I've used the FET boost, drive it to, tone at 8, level at 10. I've boosted the mids by 1 dB, and I've used a silicon clip type with the high cut at 6500 and the low cut at 120 hertz. Sounds like this. Now that also rips out a little bit of low end. So what you can do, I find this is a great trick. Let's create a stereo cab block here. I mean, you can always just use a different IR. We'll pan both of them down the middle, and we will use the right cab here. I'm going to select this 121C mix and set it to about minus 9 dB, just to add in a little bit of extra low end from this Royer 121 mic. So it sounds like this. So they are the parameters that I like to tweak on the rectifier. You can also play around with the different modes. I think the orange mode sounds really good for Recto 1. I'm a Recto 1 fan anyway, more than the Recto 2 stuff. And again, you know, if you want more of that sort of like classic thing, just turn the mid-range down and you get this. So that's where I like to dial the rectifier in. It is a really tight, kind of hard rock metal amp when you set it like this. As I demonstrated just there, if you turn the bass up and the middle down, you get more of that sort of nu metal thing happening with it, which some people obviously love. For me, that's where I like to dial the amp in. There's no real right or wrong with this, but I always find it's about bringing out enough mid-range and sort of controlling the low end enough in the rectifier, at least, to make it usable in a band mix. And my main gigging preset is based around a recto with similar settings. I'll bring it up now. There it is. You can see similar drive block settings, similar settings on the amp. I've probably got the... Well, I'm using the bass cut there. That's another option as well that you can use. The mids are a little bit lower, based on the IR, treble at 7, presence is a little bit lower again. I'm using an IR by Justin York, and this one sounds like this. As you can hear, that one is a fair bit fizzier, but the drummer and the bass player in my band are so incredibly loud that I really need that sort of fizz to cut through. And the bass player plays with quite a bit of bass distortion, hence why I've backed the mid-range off a little bit. But again, try to tweak this in the context of what you're going to be using it in. If you're recording or if you're playing with a live band, use your ears and not your eyes, as always. And anyway, hopefully this is a good compilation of tricks for the rectifier. I'm going to stop babbling on. If you enjoyed this, please get in touch in the comments section and let me know which model you like to use in the AX8 or AXFX and how you set your rectifier, and let's talk about it, because I always find there's always some great tricks and tips to be found by other users. So thanks for tuning in. See you guys next time.